Welcome to another episode of Blind Shovel, an arts and music podcast. Today, we have Jesse Balmer, a very accomplished cartoonist and illustrator who currently works in freelance in the animation industry. I think you'll enjoy this one.
What's
How you doing?
Doing all right?
What'd you work on today?
Just working on Adventure Time, drawing a Gothic skyscraper. That is very challenging.
Background?
Yeah.
Is that what you're doing currently?
Yeah.
And what exactly is this? An Adventure Time spinoff?
Yeah, it's just, well, I mean, I guess I technically can't get into too much detail, but it's a spinoff. It's a spinoff involving Fiona and Cake. And I believe that is all that has been announced.
Okay. That's kind of a good starting point because in a sense, Adventure Time is what the inspiration of that show is what made you get your shit together. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. That remains true. Will always be true. Seeing the artists who were working on that show, and just like their output and their skill level, it definitely made me reorient.
And that manifested in a grueling home test. Was it a home test, like a storyboard test kind of thing?
Well, I did so. Like, God, I wonder what year this was, but man, I really don't even know. It must have been 2012, maybe, or 2013. I got a storyboard test, and that was grueling. I was not at the level yet, and I was, very amateurish, but I was still looking at those people and wanting to be, involved in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Moynihan maybe who pointed them at me and took the test. It was goofy. I was pretty proud of it though. And it definitely working on it was, I learned a lot, but, ultimately when I look back at it, it's pretty embarrassing. And of course didn't get the job. I think that's when they hired Steve Wolfhard, who's one of the greatest of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I bow to him still. And, and then 3 years later, I got a test to do one of the designers, this girl Joy Ang. She recommended me for a design position, and there were two open, so I just tested for both and got the background design.
Okay. I forgot that because I think I recall you working on that storyboard test.
Yeah, that was well before I was employed.
Yeah, and then I remember you getting it and being drained of your soul for the first 2 weeks. Just exhausted.
When I first started working on backgrounds?
I don't know if it was backgrounds or just working there in general. I think you were just being incredibly ambitious and going too hard.
Well, that was when I first started in the office. I was pretty normal. I mean, they only give you 10 backgrounds a week or so when you first start and are doing freelance. So that's what I was doing, and that was fine. And then, when I first got hired proper and showed up at the office, I was so excited and so over earnest that I did some insane number that I will never ever match. I think I did 23 backgrounds in a week, which was absurd. My hand hurt, and my supervisor pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, man, you don't need to be doing that."
Right.
That makes everybody look bad. No one wants to work that hard. You're probably going to hurt yourself. Don't Like,
Right.
good job, but don't do that.
And previous to that, you fancied yourself a fecal face kind of Bay Area artist, right?
I mean,
that was the goal?
That was kind of the goal. I like in high school and while I was going to community college, I definitely like looked at all those Bay Area like skate artists as the coolest of the cool. And some of them I still do, but I was looking at like that dude Michael Sieben and Travis Millard, guys who did like skateboard graphics and stuff. And they had fine art careers as well, and I just thought it just seemed like the coolest thing ever. Just kind of like ugly, colorful artwork, and there was something appealing about it to my young mind.
What do you think caused that transition?
From being excited by those things to not anymore?
Yeah, I mean, you could be excited by them, but deciding that you should do something else.
Well, I mean, it was years of struggling and like trying to be in art shows and like never selling work and just not making any money, only burning money.
Mm-hmm. You think it's financial or strictly?
Oh yeah, it was definitely financial. It was like a purely pragmatic decision at a certain point where I was just like, clearly I'm not going to like make it doing this. Like I could do this for as long as I want. I don't make the kind of work that gets popular, and I'm like too introverted to be like an art personality, which is, something I've always, known about myself. So I just realized it wasn't going to happen probably.
But it wouldn't be accurate to say that, let's say you had infinite money at that age and you could have just kept making that kind of work. Would you think you would have kept doing that as opposed to pursuing a career in animation?
I think so, honestly. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think I probably would have kept doing it. I was really into process, and I was having a great time making work at that time. And, I like in some ways like miss my relationship to art making then. And I, like, obviously I've grown a lot and I'm happy with where I'm at, but like, yeah, I think, there would have been trade-offs. Like I probably would have, if you're kind of doing that kind of art career, I think people get, and this is something I thought about a lot then, people get pigeonholed and they just make work that's kind of the same forever. And, I hope that wouldn't have happened to me if I had infinite money and just kept making work. But, the thing I really enjoy about what I've embarked on is just like that it is sort of a endless skill ceiling. So I can just continue to attempt to ascend.
Right. I mean, the pigeonholing tends to occur because it's almost like brand recognition. It's a financially safe move. So in this hypothetical where you have infinite money, I suppose you could avoid it. But it also is like beyond that, people are very comfortable thinking they know who someone else is. And so if they can feel that way about an artist, it makes them feel good. Oh, I know who you are. I know what you make. I know what that is. And you can betray them and they take it very personally. But, Negron is a great example of, I'm glad he continued on that path since you two collaborated. And I remember talking to him at one point and he was fancying, rubbing up against, I think, some kind of animation job.
Yeah, I mean, I think for him it was financial too, though. It's like, it's just at a certain point it's pragmatic. And, like when you're struggling in fine art, like, and you look over at these people who like can afford a nice apartment and like can like easily buy a car and do all these things, have health insurance, all this shit that just like, when you're a kid, you just like don't even, and you're an artist, you don't even think you'll ever need. And then you start getting older and you're like, oh, fuck.
Right.
But yeah, like I think ultimately he has, because he has kept with it for so long, it's starting to like take off for him, which I think is fantastic. I know he's been traveling, doing shows in Europe and stuff. So yeah.
Well, I
I
also
thought
think that personalities fit these fields better. And
for sure.
so that's why I'm a little surprised to hear that you would have potentially pursued that, because it seems like you're in a place that fits your personality well,
For
but
sure.
you know what I mean?
But I like right now, like all I can think about is like I want to do like it would be so fun to just make like paintings, like
Hmm.
I do fantasize about that. And that was always like at the back of my mind. Like I'm just like, oh, maybe gain clout in this other area, and then people will kind of take you seriously for these other reasons that you've like fostered in in a different field, and then hopefully you can capitalize on that like later. So it was just like a biding my time kind of thing, and I don't know that that's a reality at all
I
yet,
don't, yeah,
but
those two fields, one might undermine the other. And
for sure.
if you're looking for like outside of like a fecal, I don't know what is the new fecal face, but um, for
I
whatever
mean,
reason, I think making fine art
I don't think
coming out of
anything.
it.
I don't
Go
think
ahead.
anything really replaced it. Honestly, like that. I feel like it was such a kind of a cool pocket of that kind of gross space, and yeah, I don't know. I can't think of. I mean, I guess I also just am not paying attention at all anymore. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
maybe
I wonder.
nothing did, and maybe nothing should have, because it certainly ran its course.
Sure,
I think we
sure.
all know that. But it had a good regional identity, whether I like some of the work. But what was nice is that you could say, oh, that's from that physical location pretty
Yeah,
clearly.
from that location, from that time, very much. There was like a skate, indie music, art kind of. I don't know, realm trifecta.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that the desire to make a painting stems from just the desire to work slower? I'm sure animation is very quick turnarounds.
Yeah, I think that's a part of it. It's also just like taste. For me, like I definitely am like moving away from wanting to draw like to have like my Instagram feed be like characters, like and like drawing like cool sci-fi guys and cool fantasy guys. Like I like having the ability to do that stuff, but it's like that's not what really attracts me right now.
Like you
And
want to get away from the profile golden boys a little bit.
I don't know. I just like the things that are appealing to me now. The things that I want to look at tend to be in that space a bit more, and in like more the fine art, like really great paintings. Like I look at like Canadian landscape painting, and I'm like, those guys fucking for the life.
Are you talking like, was it Lauren Harris, that kind
I'm
of stuff?
Unfortunately, I'm not well versed enough to name names, but I have a few books that I will look at periodically and get me super in the mood.
I think I think that's it, because he was part of a group called the Group of Seven.
Yeah. It's like those guys, those people, and that surrounding movement. I would say, and there are definitely other artists.
Do
But
you think that's related to drawing these backgrounds?
no,
No.
not really. Unfortunately, like if the show were a different kind of show, maybe, but that's stylistically that's not what's happening at all.
Right. You have no desire to depict figures within these landscapes. You want to simply do
Um, no,
landscape painting.
that's not exactly what I'm saying. I think I just mean to say that those are the things that inspire me right now. That's the kind of work that inspires me is like fine art that has taken the artist kind of a longer time, and I would love to like refocus on color and things like that, things that I haven't thought about in a while.
Right. Do you have any actual plan as how you would arrive at that?
Like painting.
Yeah, how you would carve out a space for that in your life, or when it would happen?
I don't have a plan. It is currently just a fantasy, but I know what the work would look like, and I don't know. It's something I've only just started thinking about somewhat seriously, so it's a relatively new idea. But it would be fun to share a studio with a buddy or something, and
A bud.
go make work on the weekends or something.
Would you go back? Well, we've talked about this before, but would you go to art school? Is that still there? Is that desire still there?
No, I don't think so.
Was it there? Am I imagining that? I feel like it was there briefly.
There was a moment, maybe, but I think that was more to do with just like technical skill. And there's definitely still a few areas where I feel lacking, and it would be really nice to have like some really solid practice. And it would be, it'd be like, it's definitely a fantasy to like go to school, like animation school in Europe or something, but I don't imagine that will actually happen.
I mean, it could.
Yeah, I guess it could.
It certainly could.
But I'm not pursuing it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, can you speak a bit about the OC? What that
like
means to you?
being raised there.
You think you think it shows in some ways?
No, I think. Well, I mean, yeah, in
reaction to it.
Yes, definitely, like a sort of ideally an opposite reaction, but
because you just have a strictly antagonistic relationship to it. That's Orange County for people who don't know.
I don't have a strictly antagonistic relationship. I don't think about it that much or that hard, but I am grateful ultimately that I grew up there. It was like a very nice place to grow up. I definitely had a moment when I was like first looking at lots of fine art in high school and just like seeing these people who were making certain kinds of work, and I was just like, where are they drawing from? I feel like I don't have this well that some of these people are drawing from, just because I lived a fucking had a very pleasant childhood. So yeah, I would say OC, fantastic place to grow up. Loved having access to the beach. Took advantage of it. And then at a certain point, you get old enough and you just kind of see what it is culturally. And I had to get the fuck out of there. So I did.
When you go back, do you love it?
I mean, my mom has a nice little haven that's not really couched in any of the kind of gross parts of Orange County. It's like she lives in Dana Point, which is kind of a slightly funkier neighborhood. It's not like she doesn't live in one of these like gated communities. Mm-hmm. Or like it's not super. She's like definitely like middle class, so she's not a part of the like moneyed Republican scene down there, which I think is what many people associate it with.
I know so little about it, but it's interesting to talk about, and it reminds me that you're a beach man, which sometimes I forget.
Yeah.
You seem like a woodsman, not like a lumberjack, but
I feel, yeah. I mean, every time I go down there, I don't spend that much time thinking about the beach in my life these days, but every time I get in the water, I'm like, oh my God, yes, I am a beach man.
Yeah.
If I'm not,
it'll do that to you.
It's crazy. Like every time I'm in the water, I just like, what am I? I'm like wasting my life not doing this every day.
Being in water?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple ways to get there.
Sure.
Several ways. But what about the desire to have one's own show? Is that still there?
Yeah. I'm kind of roughly. I will like work on things periodically but nothing tends to hold my interest for very long. And I feel like if the thing doesn't hold my interest long enough to like write a series of outlines, then it's doomed to fail. But yeah, definitely that's a fantasy still, and I am working on loosely something right now, and I'm like better positioned to pitch it to a variety of people than I've ever been. So that's something that I will be doing this year, almost certainly.
Does it involve these tiny wizard men?
Or goblins, yeah.
Goblins? Is it a goblin comedy?
It is a goblin. It's not a comedy. It's like a
It's a
ambient.
genre.
It's like an ambient
Ambient
goblin
goblin.
story with very little dialogue.
Is it I think you showed me that Rainbow Goblin book. I don't remember. Is it called the Rainbow Goblins?
It's called the Rainbow Goblins. Yeah, no, it's not like that.
That's a good one.
Those goblins are terrifying. Those are very
horrible.
very Olivo guys.
Yeah, it's a shame. But that's what comes out of me.
little scoundrels.
Yeah. Well, that'd be cool. I mean, I think your vision is idiosyncratic enough where it should have its own show. Now, not to say that actually, it clearly seems to me, like, I don't know much about Pendleton Ward's work, but it doesn't, if you were to just show me his visual work, it's like a feed of his work, a Tumblr or something, I certainly would not have, even content-wise, it wouldn't jump out at me as something extraordinary.
His skills are very funny animation, like very funny and just visually, like hilarious visual ideas, and his writing is just incredibly instantly the funniest. So he just is like a comedy genius, I think.
So like what would you're pitching this goblin ambient track. Is it funny? It has to be funny. No,
it's really not. It's like we're going to be pitching it to some people who like this kind of thing. So, and like to make this kind of thing. I mean, it's.
Oh, we can't talk about
it. Yeah, we'll see. But
we can't talk about that kind of thing.
We can.
Yeah.
I just will say it is definitely an answer to a lot of like loud, fast-paced storytelling that dominates children's media. So I would like it to be kind of, like a mini series format, like 10 episode thing that just like has an ending and feels like a fable.
Right. That's good.
And just kind of explores this world and will be ideally fascinating enough visually for it to kind of hold people's attention.
Yeah,
and then wise. Ideally, this main character is like cute enough and appealing enough that you sort of are compelled to see where he goes and what he sees and all these things. So,
yeah, I think slowing it down, making it quiet, it all makes sense. It's just too much. There's so much horrible animation. I'm speaking morally almost. It's like it's an immoral thing to do almost.
Well, I mean, it's not. I don't think it's immoral. I don't think people intend it as immoral. It's like it is just what tests well and what it's like what holds attention of. So it will definitely be sort of a hard sell making something that's slower and like deliberately beautiful and like it's like inevitably it'll be like more expensive to make what I am thinking it might look like, and so it'll honestly will be a tough sell, but I will feel like I failed if I don't at least put a pitch together and just be like, this is what needs to be made right now.
I certainly don't mean to imply that there's intention behind that supposed immorality I speak of, but I do think that when you lessen the attention span of humans and it has like this snowball effect of just basically making people less resistant to intelligent, autonomous, resistant to bad ideas. It's almost like a mob mentality that's born from this lack of focus.
For sure. It's very easy to like go conspiracy on it and be like, oh, absolutely, there's a concerted effort to make people worse. But it's just I think it does probably make people easier to sell to and more predictable somewhat, and that seems to be the goal to some degree.
I mean, part of the beauty of, not that these are spoken about often, of capitalism is if you were to pitch your show, it may very well do great because it's kind of flipping the current trend. So I think
Sure.
there is often a balance. I think a lot of things work like that. And, people used to talk about podcasts, be like, no one's going to listen to 3 hours, 4 hour podcasts. They want like 10-second, 1 minute clips. It's so hard to predict human behavior on that level. But, when I think about pacing, a show that comes to mind for me is Samurai Jack, because it has a strange mix of both of those things.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely, certainly that'll be a reference point. It won't have like such pure, like fun action, but I want there to be a few like set piecey moments in there to keep it, so there's a little bit of activity and energy, but not too much.
Yeah, what a truly unique show that was.
Yeah, it really was. He, the guy who made that, just released a new show called Primal.
Yeah, I tried it. You should also try to pronounce his name if you remember it, because it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Gendy.
Yeah.
Tartakovsky.
It's pretty good. Primal was not interesting to me or visually compelling somehow, and that's my fault. I'll take that one.
No.
Take the blame on that.
That's all right. It is pretty hideous to me as well. I like kind of hate like Western graphic sensibilities a lot. So, or like,
what do you mean by that?
Nickelodeon, like Cartoon Network. I just like the aesthetics of a lot of the shows are really, I hate them so much.
Wow.
There's so many terrible, terrible styles at play.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, it's like, I don't love the way cartoons look here very much.
Here as opposed to?
I just am thinking of like European comics where cartoons are a little bit more thoughtful and designs are a little bit more appealing and a little bit more intentional. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the visual ideas are sort of like based in this like 1950s era illustration, or I don't know. I honestly don't know enough to talk about this in an intelligent way, but when I think of like Dexter's Lab, I just like hate the way that shit looks.
there was two distinct phases of that show.
I remember,
if you recall.
Yeah. I remember one time I was going off on another show to this one artist that I knew in San Francisco, and this girl was like, "Oh, yeah, my brother created that show."
Nice.
I was like,
"Oh, it doesn't make it any less true." I think what happens is you can actually feel the condescension in the animation style, and by that I mean the thinking that a child is stupid and that they aren't deserving of content or form that is a little more sophisticated and asks them to step up to it. And I think even in illustration, I always thought American illustration was, I had a hard time getting it, but European illustration was much more open to stranger ideas and deeper ideas.
Sure.
So there's something at play there. I have much less knowledge of what's going on there, but
I'm going to sound like a total idiot if I try and like do any sort of analysis right now, but
go ahead.
I'm just saying I have a sense. I have a sense.
Yeah.
I can't, I don't have any names or references to back it up. I just know what I see and feel.
Yeah. So besides these Canadian painters, what other influences have you got going on right now?
Influences.
We don't need to, that word is...
just like children's book illustration that sort of, is beautiful.
Contemporary?
Mostly like no, mostly not
Yeah.
contemporary, I would say.
Hmm.
There was a period of time where I was like really actively collecting children's books and looking at lots of that illustration and just really enjoying, the kinds of shapes that show up and just like soft. I just really am enjoying like soft tones
Mm.
and smooth shapes and uh, I
Go
don't
on.
know, elegance. I like elegance and beauty, Michael.
Do you
I'd say.
think Jesse? Yeah, yeah. Do you think fecal face Jesse Balmer would think, this Jesse Balmer was lame for that?
No, I think he would be like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he would. I mean, I think fecal face Jesse Balmer just drew kind of to the best of his ability. I feel like I've learned a lot and gotten a lot better at drawing. So that was always kind of at the center of my work. So I'm sure I would have recognized that and been like, good for him.
Well, the content was darker and more overtly high schooly existential angst.
Yeah, it's very
You know,
stupid, deeply stupid.
it was
Yeah,
stupid in some ways.
it was. It just was. Yeah, I don't know. It's.
I guess what
I
I'm
was.
trying to get at is like I don't know where we could start from the beginning. Like you grew up as a child and you thought you were going to be an artist. I know you had an uncle who was an artist, so does that have some relation to
I
that?
had a grandfather who was an artist,
Grandfather.
and my dad was
Your
an
dad,
artist
right?
as well, and never made a career go at it, but always was doing it casually while I was growing up. And yeah, definitely saw that and like just got into the process and was just like I would like sit and watch my dad draw for hours and just really like get giddy about it. I loved it so much watching him. Like,
Oh, you wouldn't draw with him; you would watch him.
I mean, I would also draw, but I would definitely watch him without doing anything,
Hmm.
just because I was like so fascinated by the next line. Um,
Why do you
yeah,
think he stopped drawing? Just having
I mean,
children?
I think he got into like his like practice kind of changed as I grew up. Like he for a long time was doing Christmas cards, and that was like his big art endeavor that he did every year, and he like got really into it, and
Hmm.
you know would go to Kinko's and like make these like color copies of them and elaborate like Prismacolor illustrations, and then he would mount them on. He would reproduce them and then mount them on cardstock and send these like beautiful Christmas cards to all of our relatives and friends.
I
Which
like
was
that kind of integration.
yeah, it's really nice. Um, and his style and his like sense of humor is also like pretty. Uh, what would I call it? It's kind of crude, I guess. And so I
Hmm.
think that probably informed my thinking and my sort of sensibilities growing up.
Well, he likes
In terms
Oingo
of
Boingo, right? So
yeah, exactly. So like the music and the work that I was looking at from him, and it was always very like yeah, in this crude area that I think I just followed that somewhat. And I don't know. I also think that artists draw ugly when they don't know how to draw pretty. So I also just saw that as like a maturing, I guess.
I think
And
that's true. I mean,
not always, but for me it was. I like wanted. I
yeah.
eventually was like, it would be nice to be able to create something that people really want to look at, that aren't like teenagers.
Yeah, even I, the ugliest of drawers, is realizing that sentiment. In the sense of like, well, it makes sense, right? You got no skill sets. You're starting to draw. You want attention because you're at a
Hmm.
certain age. So what do? You draw a thing that shocks people. or
For sure.
in one way or another. And I mean, the simplest way for me is like try to draw a beautiful woman, her face,
Yes.
or
Yes,
try to
exactly.
draw a man from the woods with a beard and a mustache, and he's all raggly, and you can draw 150 lines and fuck up 99 of them, and it's probably going to look decent. With the woman, you
Exactly.
got basically 5 lines,
Yep.
and if you don't know how to draw and reveal the interior form of a face, you
You're
got
doomed.
nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good point that, you know, I do think it matters if it's a choice. You know, if it's a choice to draw a beautiful thing or an ugly thing, it's very different if Picasso's drawing crudely when at 15 he could draw better realistically than like anyone.
Yes.
That, you know, not anyone, but most people.
Yeah.
And
It
we've
always
certainly
lends credibility.
lends credibility and depth.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the choice of not beating the shit out of someone when you can versus just being so weak you can't.
Just like that.
But beauty, man, I mean, you have to experience genuine beauty too. And at a certain age, although you may grow up in the OC, you don't know the contrast per se. And so I don't know if you can experience beauty until later.
Yeah, I mean, I think the kinds of things that a kid is interested in tend to be sort of, yeah, I mean, that is like that crudeness, that ugliness, all that stuff is like really weirdly appealing when you're young. And then as you get older, you just tend to move toward things that soothe your aching mind.
Yeah.
At least I do. I always want to look at things that make me feel calm and listen to music that makes me feel calm. So
Right. It's a lot harder I mean, I never liked noise music or even metal.
I definitely like a lot of really loud, really hateful music, and
Yeah.
I can still get there and get into it, but it's largely, uh, yeah. I like to make myself feel good with with the media I intake.
Yeah, well, beauty is a form of magic, and we were talking about magic the other day.
We were.
And it's interesting to me that you fancy yourself a magician
Um,
or wizard.
Not exactly, but I mean, I certainly, I wish I thought about it in those terms. I feel like I probably should, but
You want
uh,
to
yeah, no,
amplify the magic of the world.
sure. I think that's a very like noble goal, and distill sort of uh, what an artist is. I mean, not every artist, obviously. Many artists aren't trying to do that and are trying to make you question all kinds of different things. But for me, definitely, I would place the most value in like adding something into that space that makes people see and feel like awe or connect a little bit more with their kind of spiritual thinking.
Yeah, like the moon reflects the sun, and it's not emitting light itself. A good artist, a real artist, is simply reflecting some divine energy, or you can call it nature, God, whatever. But it's what I'm saying is an egoic artist thinks themselves alone, and they try to develop their own thing. And more, I think that as fallacious. That a good one is humble, acknowledges what it's reflecting,
Yeah,
and isn't trying to reinvent beauty, which is just
sure.
ridiculous, or rejecting it, or and
Well, yeah, just very egocentric and very like I don't even know. Like I guess we've talked a lot about like legacy, and I guess that's probably what you're thinking about when you're trying to reinvent. And I think it's when you look at like great artists, frequently they have on some level like done that. And like when you look at art history, like so it's easy to sort of put that idea on a pedestal, but I sort of have let go of the idea of greatness, and so
yeah,
like
that's
humble humble beauty maker is a fine directive for me.
I refuse to let go of greatness, but I think semantically we may be speaking of different things. By greatness, I just mean the highest manifestation of your potential.
No, yeah, no. I'm talking about greatness in terms of legacy, like and living on in human memory. Like that metric is something that I don't even know if I ever really cared that much or like saw that as realistic. I just like was not raised a very ambitious person, so I never really needed that, I guess. But you know, I think a lot of people see an art career kind of in that context to some degree. And like, if you're not influencing the culture at large, like, what are you doing? Which is, you know.
I get it. I get both perspectives.
But I think, I think, you know, growing up in the sort of internet age and getting to sort of be a part of these like micro art communities, that just kind of allows you to see the reality, which is that there's no way you're going to like, it's very unlikely you're going to touch everyone, but like, if you can just be respected within a small community, that's plenty.
That's all you have to keep doing, but is doing it in your 30s. Now I can't speak to what you're doing because you work within a company that has many artists that you look up to. But for most people, that wouldn't be true. And it's easier in college. Although a lot of people don't even seek out people who are better than them. And those people aren't usually very good.
Sure.
I don't know if the makeshift community of, you know, looking at other people's work on Instagram or Tumblr inspires one enough to keep going in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to be very interested for that to be helpful. But I mean, it worked for me, and it still can. Not in the same ways. Obviously, there's like, I think everyone's pretty jaded at this point by that.
What do you mean? Oh, that yeah.
Just by those communities and by the way those platforms operate. So it's just like it doesn't feel quite as connected as maybe it once did. But
yeah, it's interesting how innocent Tumblr appeared. I'm not sure it was or wasn't, but it certainly didn't reek of the same things.
Well, I mean, neither did Instagram. It's you know, all these platforms figured out what to do with the data, and now it's just like so overt and feels so rapey.
It's hard to care.
Yeah. It's bad.
You know, I think Miyazaki is one of those people who puts that pressure on what we were just talking about. Like, he somehow I'm sure we both think this, he somehow embodies a tone and a certain moral ambivalence and complexity that it seems like the apex. Because there's grotesque things that aren't that grotesque. There's beautiful things that are actually beautiful. There's characters that are quote unquote ugly, although it's hard for him to make a truly ugly thing. And looking at that level of greatness, which I think we could call that greatness in both senses. It seems like a corrosive kind of greatness, and just peak performance greatness.
Sure.
It's interesting at a certain point you look at that and you go, wow, I'm never going to even... There's a certain age where you can, maybe it's later 20s where you just go, okay, maybe I'm in the NBA, but I'm never going to be Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
yeah. I don't even feel like I'm in the NBA, to be honest, but
I'm not, I mean, that's much harder to know in the art.
But for me, it's the art of not letting that bother me. But yeah, no, totally. That is, I mean, I just see those works as like an undeniable sort of high point, and you know, seeking anything toward that direction is great. But like, you know, I think you've talked about this a lot. Just like I'm also not really willing to be the artist who sacrifices literally everything for their work, which he definitely does and did. So his career was at the expense of everything else in his life, and
Right.
And you know, that's not terribly appealing to me.
Do you envy him?
No.
Do you envy any
No,
artist?
I'm like happy for him. I envy. No, not really. I don't. Who would I envy?
For me, like, all right, envy's not worth it because you don't have enough information ever to understand what the other person had to do or sacrifice or what they experienced. But
I mean, anyone who's like really good and has a cool life.
yeah, like I
guess I envy them.
I abstractly envy like Mobius because it seems like he's like a good, normal man with like I think he had like 4 kids, and
Mm-hmm. And then he just had this like monumental practice. Yeah, no, totally. That is enviable. I don't. Yeah, I don't imagine I will be running that race. So
no, it's not a matter of that. I think it's and envy might be the wrong word, but it's important to remember that there are always levels that you can go up, and
yeah,
I don't think they always have to be climbed in this unhealthy way which Miyazaki might or may not do. I'm not sure, but I think at a certain point you might start to think that sacrifice isn't worth it, and I don't know if you necessarily stagnate, but you just remain. It's a question of like if being content is a bad thing or not.
I mean, he does not seem like a content man.
No. Exactly. That's my my point.
That is not contentment. He is a tortured soul making that which the cosmos require him to create. He has no choice.
Right. I mean, to me, it's so evident that
he's a vessel for true magic, and you know, I every time I think about Miyazaki, I get like sad because I'm just like the fact that he's a mortal man is such a loss, such a terrible loss.
It's also sad that something like that can die.
I know.
I think about that, like Norm Macdonald. For some reason, for me, when he died, I was like, it's just weird to me that he can die.
Miyazaki and Norm Macdonald.
Well, he's just so innocent.
Giant.
Well, I love Norm, and
he's.
But there's something about him that's like it doesn't seem like he should be able to die. Sure. And same thing with Miyazaki's work. Obviously, animation takes tons of people, and there's a lot of great artists there. But he captures something. And I've read a bunch of, I mean, you've probably read the same books by him, about him.
Yeah.
That moral ambivalence, or that ambivalence, actually, it's like the bedrock of what he does, is what's missing from a lot of children's animation. Yeah. It's like they want to, and this is actually the issue I have with hippie thinking in general, or sometimes New Age stuff, is like they want to conveniently slice out the dark stuff and present the sugar. How dare you?
1 second. I'm extremely sorry. I need to just give me 1 second.
Oh wow. This is what I'm talking about. You can't get rid of this kind of thing.
You just can't do it. All right, we're good. I'm sorry. There was an alarm that went off, and
you try to get rid of it.
It made you drop out.
Comes right back in.
We're good. Sorry, what were you saying? I am so sorry.
Oh wow. I was just talking about the fact that a lot of modern children's cartoons and books try to remove that ambivalence, that dark and light, and just try to present that light. And it ends up being this washed out product, is a good word, because it's just like a sugary representation of a false thing.
Yeah, even more so now, where everyone's very, very concerned with how things will be received online.
Right.
Just like fear of backlash, etc. It's just like, it is a hard time to make things that might,
Have
come
depth.
up. Just like, and any ambiguity about where things stand morally and things like that. It's just like, the work must
Yes, comply.
make your political ideas known, and if you're not saying something about rights, what are you saying?
Right. And right. And that's why I want a lot of money.
Sure.
I never really wanted money for, I suppose, shallow reasons. Those things hedonism doesn't interest me, but protection of just like basic things, like, being able to make something with depth that might be somewhat controversial at some point, and not have your whole life ruined. I feel like you got to be stockpiling a decent amount of money, or at least building a community that knows who you actually are.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
It's a great motivator.
Creating cancelable media.
I mean, it doesn't take much to go there, There'll be a backlash. Everything is pendular, and like, soon we'll have obnoxious shows that are just trying to be offensive. I'm sure that'll come back.
Yeah, I'm sure. On Ben Shapiro's network, we'll have
Spike TV. Yeah, Spike TV. Ben Shapiro's Spike TV show.
Yeah, that's going to be exactly what that is. That's filling that niche.
What about this? We might both relate to this as well. This idea: the pessimism of the intellect, but the optimism of the will. Do you relate to this? This is what I think is in Miyazaki's work as well. It's like, you can sit there all day and your mind can tell you things are going downhill, things are getting worse, but then your behavior represents something different. And I always thought waking up and making art, especially if it's beautiful art, there's a lot of will involved in that. And frankly, what one thinks and says is of very little importance. In fact, when you read Miyazaki interviews, he's so much
more pessimistic than his work. Yeah, no, totally.
And less, I think, even nuanced. Maybe the work is the best way for him to express that ambivalence.
It clearly is.
Yeah.
He is not a skilled speaker.
He's a good writer, all things considered, honestly.
No, for sure. For sure. I'm just saying it's, when he's talking, he lets his pessimism sort of take over. And, it's like, I do kind of think that he's like somewhat self-aware. And I think that that character kind of reminds me of like Roman, who was like so negative, it's funny.
Yeah.
I don't know if Roman still plays that character, but
it's been too long. He's probably just happy now.
Yeah, I hope so. But yeah, I think there's like a self-aware kind of for comedic effect thing happening there is maybe what I suspect a little bit. So hopefully he's not that fucking dark.
Do you an aspect of his career that's very important is the fact that hand-drawn animation was still occurring when he was on his rise. And obviously, I think Mononoke is the first instance of CG on the boar with the little tentacles. I think that's CG. And he's like, I shouldn't have done it. And I think there's an interview where he's like, I regret doing that,
Sure.
But do you have any... So, like, I used to fight against using the tablet and digital processes. I still have like a weird feeling about it, but it's so goddamn convenient. It's hard. But what's your relationship to that? And like, do you care? I'm sure you're drawing these backgrounds, like they're fully digital, right?
Fully digital. I definitely would. I tried for a moment to keep things a little bit traditional when I first started, and would just like try doing little sketches and like just like do thumbnails basically on Post-its and things like that, just because it's like it really is so much faster for my brain to think at that scale and have this one-to-one just like relationship, whereas it's the infinite scaling of the, or not infinite, but just this like zoom in zoom out thing that makes thinking about drawing digitally for me so challenging. Just like things end up taking a bit longer, and decisions take longer, and it's harder to get like confident.
Oh, interesting. So
like
you think it takes longer?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it depends. It depends. Obviously, it depends. It's like certainly the editing process is faster, but like the getting out like a first draft of a thing would definitely be faster if I was doing it traditionally. But that also depends on the type of environment. I mean, with backgrounds, like I am definitely slow at drawing architecture, for example, and that would also be slow on paper. But
it'll be interesting to see if hand drawn comes back in a big way or not. Well, it won't come back in a big way, but if it comes back, and I think of David Lauer, if you know him. He does like stop motion stuff. He works with Woodrow White sometimes, but like I'm going to interview him soon, and he just like does stop motion stuff, and I don't think there's a ton of people doing that anymore, but he just made his own studio, and I think it's a beautiful gesture. Again, it seems like something like that's going to die, and then it becomes almost like this bit highly sought after thing because very few people do it. Well, then he would die, and then it would probably actually die. It's probably the cycle of these things, It's just a shame we'll lose. I think we're going to lose a lot more information than we think we're losing.
I don't think that it will ever fully go away. I think those processes will remain fascinating, and people will. I mean, it'll definitely go like super niche and will be very expensive, but I'm sure that there will be people who will fund, projects in that realm and do that just because of kind of the novelty of doing it and the purity of doing it.
Right.
I don't imagine that will get phased out necessarily. Fully.
Yeah. I mean, like the real question is, does it yield a different result? And I think it clearly does. Like, even if we don't know it, when we draw digitally, there are a lot of differences in how you think, and I wonder what that adds up to be. But it might be why you crave the voluptuousness of a nice painting.
For sure, that's definitely
just
part of it.
Material. I think there's you can start to feel almost disassociative when you engage with digital processes too much.
For sure. It's also just like it's like miserable for your eyes staring at a screen. It's just like it sucks the energy out of you in a way that making art traditionally does not. I mean, that's definitely still an energy drain, but it's not quite the same. There's something hateful about staring at a screen all day.
Yeah. It's also pathetic from the outside. You know what I mean? Like, just like that matters.
Yeah, there's nothing romantic about it at all.
No. Like, I mean, think about jerking off in front of a screen and zoom out just 10 feet. And it's not, and it's not that it's equivalent to that, but just an example. If there's a man jerking off in a tree in the medieval times, I don't mean that.
He's a star.
Well, it's quite beautiful, actually. It's, the sun is out.
Yeah.
He's looking over a wall.
That's an enviable position.
But the coldness of the screen, and I don't know, it's such a common act. It's hard to forget how absolutely dystopian it is.
Terribly dystopian and demeaning if you and just shame inducing when you actually stop to think about what's occurring.
That's why I always appreciated the guilt of an Abrahamic God. It's like this idea that someone's just watching you all the time.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this bug thing, man.
Okay, so first of all, you know what the bug kid?
Yeah, the bug kid.
Well, I was just riffing, you know. I can definitely say I don't trust people who really like snakes, and by that I don't mean they like to like. There's little kids they like. Manon was telling me like she is a kid. He loves drawing bugs and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then the moment a bug is near him, he just screams and runs away. So when I'm saying to love a bug, you have to be a little more committed than I think what you're putting out there, right? Like you like bugs.
Yeah.
But to what degree? Because if you say you like cats and you don't have a cat or dogs, you would be suspicious. But
no, it's just like being comfortable around it and sort of devoting a little bit of time to understanding like their role and what rather than just seeing them as bugs, you know,
of course,
seeing them as individual species and being interested in sort of machinery.
I resent that you call it machinery, but I understand. Why? Because it's too mechanistic, right? Like, I think part of respecting them is in some ways acknowledging they have something going on beyond that, if that makes sense. I don't like. I
just mean in terms of like the functioning of the sort of of the functioning of the concept of nature. I know we are a part of nature, yada yada, but it's just like I really do feel like understanding and being interested in those kinds of things is just a much less like egocentric, I guess, way to look at the world.
I think you're saying because it's anthropomorphizing. Like if you think if a dog looks like it's smiling and you're human and you're like, oh, it's smiling. There's something egocentric to that.
No, that's different.
Okay,
I think.
It's functionality, kind of like this thing's of no use to me. Supposedly, it might actually be of great use, but if the bug doesn't seem like it can be used in some sense.
Sure. Yeah. I think just like thinking of that sort of like a level of life as sort of disposable or, and I think I just mean to say that it kind of starts there. That's like bugs are something you have access to like pretty quickly when you're a kid. And, you like find a roly-poly and, let it chill on your hand and look at it and let it crawl around and just like that kind of.
Yeah. Well, look, I've always liked bugs, for the record. But to give some context, when I'm saying there's a bug kid who's obsessed with bugs, or a snake kid, so like I think in some ways I was trying to draw a ridiculous conclusion that if someone's like really close to reptiles, like they really love reptiles, you might want to watch out for them because there's something weird.
Why?
Well, there's a reptilian.
Those are biblical symbols?
No, because the bottom part of our brain is more reptilian. There's some weird things going on there. And like, they're cold. They're cold creatures.
But anything that isn't anthropomorphized seems cold.
Well, look, a dog is a bundle of joy. And like, I hang out with my cat quite often.
But a wolf is
wonderful.
Well, no, a wolf is not wonderful. A wolf is terrifying, but it has its relationships and it has value. I'm just saying. Like,
do you think you can have a great relationship with a reptile?
I don't think you can have meaningful relationships with most animals, and I'm just saying that doesn't render them. That doesn't render them worthless. That's all that I think getting at.
They're not worthless, but all I'm saying is I think there's
like
personality.
The way the snake relates to a human doesn't matter. And
see, this I fundamentally disagree with because I think there's like a kind of like I don't think you can ever make an argument outside of being a human. In fact, to do so, I think is like a pretense. If that makes sense. Like I don't think you can make non-human based or human-centric arguments because you can't get outside of being a human. that make sense?
So all the arguments are human-centric, you mean to say?
Yeah, I think the fact that I am a human, right? Like there's this is where I remember I was listening to Alan Watts once and you were like, I like that you didn't like him. Because at the time I was listening to him, I thought everyone liked him. And you were just like, I don't get it. It doesn't do anything. And I think why it doesn't do anything in hindsight is a lot of the ideas feel very like detached from what actually being a human is like. And for me, at least the way I was interpreting his stuff or Zen, which I don't think I interpreted correctly, but it just feels like really detached from the normal machinations of being a person and the biases of that and the humility of just being.
Yeah, yes, but I like there's so much that's like such a blanket. You're covering a lot of ground with that statement.
Oh, certainly.
And I don't think that like the normal machinations of being a human and then are necessarily at this time super functional.
What do you mean?
I just feel like there is like, I mean, it's clear to me that culturally, like we like disinterest in things like a bug is sort of laying the groundwork for disinterest in sort of ecology, which is stupid.
Well, it's stupid from even a human-centric perspective. Yeah, that's kind of my point. Is like, there's no avoiding that connection to nature, and of course, like you said before, we are connected, but we're also still limited to being that human thing that projects that humanness onto everything it looks at. And in that sense, science to me, the objective of science to extract the subject out, the subject and the object out is impossible. It's kind of.
Well, yeah, I say this all the time, which is that nothing for this reason, for just because of these are all things. I'm not saying these like I'm having a novel idea here, but oh God, train of thought. It's gone.
It's fucking gone.
I lost it.
Well, you know what? Like, Nausicaa is a film that obviously addresses this, right? Like, intentionally, he's using insects, but he's also not making them insects that are relatable. And he's trying to imbue them with almost a humanity. I don't want to say humanity because that would offend you in this context, but like, he's giving them an importance. And it's interesting that film is just full of insects.
Yeah.
What other film does that?
I think that's exactly the point of the film, though, is to draw attention to the fact that Nausicaa as a character is like she has this sort of like open, tender, whether or not these beings can truly understand each other is sort of doesn't matter that much. The fact is that she is just like compelled to show empathy for, these things, and it's just like clearly the better way, clearly, of being.
Right. She has a more holistic understanding, whereas I can't remember the name. It's a T word, but they are
a Tormentians.
Yeah, they're seeking power over power, destroying things. She's seeking holistic solutions that would hypothetically better everyone's experience. She's also doing it futilely, as the book gets into. But yes, we're talking about, in some sense, two different things. I'm trying to examine the humans who attach to certain animals or species or types of creatures and making ridiculous judgments based on that, versus the validity of these things and the necessity of these things. Although I would be lying, I don't purport to have a deep connection at the depth I do with dogs and cats with roly-polies, and I do like the green inchworm. One of my favorites.
They're great.
Yeah,
like
but they're alien, right? They're so much more alien to me. Like I totally get looking at them from like, what the hell? Like, what is that clicking and this thing folds in that? I
think the idea is just like that, like having curiosity is, and like, and you know, and this is where science kind of comes in. I think there's plenty of room there to like develop fascination around. I mean, obviously, it's not for every mind, but you know, that's it seems to me that that's a better way to approach reality, is to like be interested in the details of the world.
Well, yeah. I mean, especially from the mind of an artist. And that's funny.
But I mean, I think from the mind of anyone. I don't like, yes, it's certainly helpful, and maybe that puts you in a place where you're seeing more. But I think seeing more is like inarguably better than not.
I guess my expectations are quite low, you know.
Of people?
It's not of humanity. It's like, I believe there's almost a percentage of individuals with certain sensitivities that exist at any given time. And I feel like that percentage almost remains, where it's like, you know, maybe 10% of people are really going to be interested in philosophical questions. And then there's people who are going to be really interested in the physical world and these little details. And then there's going to be like 80% of people who are social beings and genuinely like politics. They like getting riled up and divisiveness, and they like being thrown into battle. And I don't mean that literally, but they like to go to war. And I mean, that's depicted in all good stories, right? There's like a mob that doesn't know the right way, and there's one person that does, and typically they're martyred. Nausicaa is another good example of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's unavoidable. Like, I don't seek to make that 80% of people more attentive, but I also don't seek to make them have lesser attention spans via insane cartoons with big googly eyes. And like there's a responsibility to the artists to treat those people right, knowing that they might be susceptible to these things, you know? I think that is legitimately a responsibility. There's like a moral implication.
Well, I mean, people also are very much a reflection of like the homes they grow up in, and the kinds of things that they intake as children. We are definitely a product of our experiences as children, and not that we can't transcend those experiences, but you know, I think those moments are what really, you know, certainly there's sort of intrinsic interests and things like that, but and areas of where people will lean. But you know, I think that there's a lot to be said for exposure to the right ideas at an early age.
Certainly. But you know what's kind of perverse is I feel like people do all this elaborate shit they want to set this thing up for their children, make them watch the right show, and then the thing that impacts the kid could be so arbitrary, so shocking, good or bad, and out of left field. Like, I have memories that I don't understand why I remember them, but clearly that means it affected me. And it didn't seem, there are always these peripheral aspects of my childhood that only could be the benefit of like in general, you should be raised in a good household, of course. But the parents, when they try to set the thing up, I feel like it fails. But just by providing that environment, that immersive thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's
good.
There are some, but I mean, yeah, it's like, and that's, I think this is where it comes into play. Like, the more social child might be less interested in what the parents are doing, for example. But like, you know, treating kids like they're as intelligent as they are, and sort of like letting them be somewhat involved in your interests and sort of setting the stage for their interests is not a bad thing. And I know the vast majority of people like ain't got time for that shit, but
I think they do now more and more. I don't think they know how to do it, but they certainly have time to be all over their children. And I think that creates a different problem, actually, in a weird way, because nature is receding, and the parent tries to replicate the impossible complexity of it sometimes, and that's never going to work. But
no, yeah, totally.
I think it comes to maybe why it's a much more interesting audience. Like I'm sure, I hope to. One of my ideas is to make a kid's book every year of my child's life, maybe till they're like 10 or something, right? Maybe it's 30 pages. Maybe it's just trying to teach this particular kid, like, stop doing this shit through some kind of grim fairy tale, which would be funny to me. But I think it speaks to, you get in even the comics community, fine art, whatever, like, it's a little boring to make work for other jaded 30-year-olds or whatever, but when you start interacting with children and having nieces and nephews, that becomes sufficiently inspiring. And obviously Miyazaki's tackling that, right? Like, those movies are for
that's a
kids.
place where you that's a place where you really have power, as opposed to you're probably not going to change the minds of a 30-year-old. But you can shape the mind of someone whose mind is being shaped, and like that's. I mean, yeah, it seems like clearly more noble, I guess.
If done in a noble way, it's certainly more noble.
If done smartly and well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
Totally subjective too, obviously. Like, it's who can say what's right, but
well, you can say what's wrong,
yes.
And then that means right exists, but you can't quite say what's right.
Well,
I feel like that's kind of how it goes.
There's just people are so spectacularly different, and yeah, you raise a kid to be attentive, right, and in the wrong household, and he's going to get made fun of and be traumatized and then be a killer, so
right
it's just like,
and then his brother is like a perfect human. It's just it's very interesting, that dichotomy. But I think we got to do it for the kids, when I just made a drawing for my nephew when he was asked what he wanted for his birthday. The only thing he wanted was for me to make him a drawing.
That's the coolest shit I've ever heard. That's a good kid.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
I love that. I
have some ambivalence about and I don't tell kids to be artists, right? Like, that's I think I could guide a kid to be like a adult artist, but I'm not a follow your dreams kind of dude,
Yeah, I mean, I think the hands-off approach and like, you sort of, I think, leading by example more than like setting up activities is probably a slightly better. It's like indirect influence as opposed to direct influence that maybe is the key,
right?
Because the kid will want to be emulating, but like sort of like thrust things before them. And your expectations are, getting upended, and you like get frustrated and things like that. Just like all those social cues are just things that are kind of like mess up the potential for the right kind of absorption to take place.
Yeah, I mean, children want to emulate their parents, but they don't want their parents to know that they, are doing that at a certain point. Yeah. So it is true. I think like it's more of frankly, that's how you persuade anyone. This idea that you can sit someone down, convince them of your political viewpoint, and suddenly they're going to be on your team is fallacious. Like, just be the person that you think should exist.
Doing that. Yes, exactly.
But in that sense, we could wrap it up with, I want to come back to your grandfather.
Okay.
And what was his name? Harry Balmer?
Harry Balmer, yeah.
And how often do you think about him?
Semi-regularly. It's like I have a bunch of my dad's artwork in the house, and whenever I look at my dad's artwork, I think about him. So I guess fairly regularly.
But did you look to him as a? Did you understand what he was doing when you were young?
No. I mean, like he lived in Washington State, and I really didn't get to spend very much time with him, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
I spent all my time with my mom's dad, and that was a whole different set of values, and I got a lot from him too. But yeah, Harry is like this kind of more like a mythical figure, in that I a lot about him. But I knew he had a barn where he had a bunch of welding equipment, and he was just like making art all the time, and was like a Zen Buddhist, and like ruled with an iron fist over his 5 boys. And
boys, huh?
They had like a nomadic childhood, like he just traveled all around the United States, and my dad and his brothers just grew up all over the United States.
Wow.
It's crazy. And yet, it's like you can tell that there's like deep trauma in that family that no one knows how to talk about. And I have no idea how to even ask or examine that, but it's clearly like there's a lot of stuff in there that I may never know. Like my grandma left in the 60s to like go to San Francisco. Grandma Sally, who's a wonderful human being, but just like couldn't do it anymore at a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
And left Harry with the boys, and like they all clearly have like deep, weird abandonment issues, and some of them like will openly resent her occasionally, but other times everything's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, yeah, it's a complicated story, but I think when it comes to it made for me as a kid, like being an artist even more viable, I guess. And when you see someone that much older than you sort of living that life, you feel like it is a respectable way to live.
Yeah, for one, you think it's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I ask, is I don't resent this, but I had no clear example in my family of that. And, we're talking about the influence of children's minds and
yeah, totally
leading them to the right path. But yeah, none of that. And I don't know what the impact of that is. I'm grateful to not have art parents. I can say that much.
Sure. Yeah. Like, I mean, I feel happy that I had the influences that I had, and I do feel like ultimately my interests were fostered by that sort of indirect influence. So it's like, my dad was just making work for himself, and I was fascinated by that, would watch him. He would sometimes make work for me, but was never like, sitting me down and being like, you draw now.
Yeah, or sending you to like art class or something.
He would only teach me things if I asked. And
that's fair.
And, and it felt right. And then, my dad was also a very like interested and sort of attentive human being, just loved nature, taught me to like be interested in everything, basically. Zoo books kid, for sure.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know. I feel grateful for all that, I guess.
And now you got to give it back.
And now I got to give it back
to the brats of America.
Yeah, I want to.
Well, good talking to you. I hope that the ambient goblin show gets picked up.
I hope so too.
Let's put it on the vision board.
It's a pretty grim place right now, animation. But
yeah, what do you mean?
Well, like all the networks have been canceling projects right and left. Like Netflix canned a bunch of
Really?
Shows like well into production, and Cartoon Network just pulled the plug on a bunch of stuff. There's
Any idea why?
There's like mergers taking place, and streaming is proving to be more different than people expect. But yeah, like Summer Camp Island, that show that I worked on for years, that was on HBO Max for a while, and then it just like got pulled. So they took it down along with a bunch of other shows. So there's nowhere to like see this work that I, made anymore. Yeah.
That sucks.
And then like there are a bunch of episodes that still haven't even come out, and we just like have no idea where those are going to end up, and like when they'll premiere or anything. So.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of one of the worst fates for an artist, I think of Richard Williams and The Thief and the Cobbler.
Oh, God.
That's the most deep, tragic animation tale I know of.
I actually don't know the full story, but what was it? Just something that like the funding was pulled like really, really late, or?
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, I mean, I think this was 20 years in production potentially. I think he was like so perfectionist about stuff that I think he was probably pushing it. And so if I recall correctly, a lot of those animators were then poached to make Aladdin. And that's why there's such similarity in all the designs. You think about Jafar and the dude in The Thief and the Cobbler, the color of the skin and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, that's more like the genie. I'm mixing them up. But then like they just chopped it up and released it, and it was terrible. And that's what's fearful of that whole industry, or anything that requires a lot of people. And that's why, again, Miyazaki's so impressive. It's like to not only do that, but have your own studio and have control.
I mean, yeah,
this is a dream.
Of course it's a dream, but it is such a man. It's like, it feels utterly impossible to replicate, and especially like in fucking Los Angeles or Burbank. Like, just like that shit, you're not going to end up in a situation where you're getting to like make things on that level. With those kinds of budget, they do so much over there with so little. Those artists do not get paid well, and it is fucking. I would, knowing what people go through for the pay that they receive, I would just like hesitate even to just, it almost makes me question animation as a whole, as an industry, because it's just like, it's crazy. They're like, truly, people are destroying their own lives and like their health and stuff to create these absolutely undeniable works of art, but just like tremendous suffering in those movies, I think.
Right, and you can work on a movie you don't even end up liking. I mean, it just requires so much trust. It's unbelievable to me.
Well, yeah, if there's anything I've fucking seen, it's just like how jaded working in animation also makes you about animation somewhat. Like, at a certain point, you're just like, okay, I'm fucking sick of kids. I'm sick of drawings.
Yeah.
All I want to do is unplug and like float in the sea.
Well, that sounds like you speaking specifically.
It is me speaking specifically. But,
well, when I make millions of dollars, I'll fund the Goblin ambient track.
Cool.
That's the goal.
I'm a very patient man.
Yeah, we got nothing but time.
Fantastic. All right.
Well, it's bedtime for both of us, I think.
That's right. I'm going straight to bed. I'm going roller skating, actually.
How dare you? All right. Well, enjoy that. Good talking to you. And enjoy the roll.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Music by Dory Bavarsky and Mingja Chen. And next week, we have the man himself, Dory Bavarsky.